ointment here. We're making it from the dried herb. Now when you make something from the dried herb, such as this is an example of a dried herb. It's a beautiful calendula flower. This is a calendula flower. Now I usually make fresh, use the fresh flowers to make the ointment, but sometimes you run out and this is what you do, you use a dried herb. Now when you do a dried herb, it's made slightly different than you would a fresh herb ointment. So why do we make a calendula ointment? Calendula ointment is antiseptic, it's healing, it's a beautiful ointment, very soft, very gentle, help with scrapes and cuts and things like you know, itchy feet, or I can't think of all the different things. There's so many things to think about with calendula. But basically it's nature's antiseptic, so any antiseptic area that you want is really, really good. And it's very, very soothing and very, very safe, because when you make an ointment, which is just made from olive oil, it's good to try and buy some local Australian olive oil, or some organic oil if you can get it. And then you put so what we do, the recipe is 800 mils of olive oil. You measure it, you put it in the saucepan, then you get, this is the dried herb, and when you use dried herbs it's not as much as the fresh herbs, and so it's about 100 grams. So you get 100 grams of the flowers, you put them in here with the olive oil, and then you heat it up. And you heat it very gently. So when you're actually making a dried herb ointment, you've got to do it very, very gently. Now this is actually already boiled, so it's just a slight bubble, and you've got to keep it really down low in the temperature. At home I would be making this on my slow combustion stove, but here it's just made on an ordinary stove top. So basically keep the heat down and just heat it up gently. So you just feel the heat coming through with the oil, and then you just keep it on a very, very low heat, 10-15 minutes if you can do it. Don't burn it, be very wet or burn very easily, so it's actually quite easy for the herb to become brown, and you don't want that. That means you've actually destroyed some of its goodness. So it's really important to try and ensure that it's nice and yellow. So as you can see there, it's still nice and yellow, and that has been heated up for some time. I've done that very gently, and this is just at the end of it now, and you can still see that oil coming out of it there. Because when you first start up, all the oil goes into the herb and you think, my goodness, there's no oil left. But once you start stirring, you'll soon see it come up, it actually comes apart. Now what we're going to do, once we feel that's nicely done, what we do is we put it through a sieve such as this. Use stainless steel. Stainless steel is always very good to be able to use. And you just put the herb in here. At home I have got a press, a little wine press, and I often press out these really dried herbs so that I can get all the goodness out of them, because it's actually quite hard to press. Now this is only a single herb. I normally make a bigger batch than this. It's just a small batch at the moment until I get my nice fresh flowers growing. And this just looks after it in between. We do sell a fair bit of this. You can put tea tree essential oil with this if you like, but I try not to, because I like it to be used. It can be used down below for little girls and things like that with infections. It really does stop that trouble with infections that often occurs. Okay. Now what we do is we press this out. And you can see that's coming out. Pressing, you just press as hard as you can without breaking a sieve. It is a problem. Sometimes we get very vigorous people that make holes in sieves. And if you find that there's little bits in there, then you need a nice, very fine sieve. You've got a very fine mesh, and you may need to push it through this. But by the looks of it, this is actually coming through quite nicely. If you make a ointment, say with chamomile, that would always have to be put through a very fine sieve. It's important. Okay, so when you finally feel that you've got as much out as you're going to get, and by the way, this is a best fire starter. I throw in my wood in my stove, and then I throw the calendula on top of it, and oh boy, I can get some heat with it. So just pressing it right out, like as much as you can. Keep on going and going. If you want to, what you can do too, you can actually get another like this, just let it at the time. You can just leave it like that, and it could just keep dripping, and then you put the two together. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this all together. into here. So we'll just get out all those little bits and pieces because we don't want them in our ointment. Just get them out like that. And then we pour the oil back into here. And then we add some beeswax. Beeswax is there to thicken it. And the beeswax that we've got, we just poured into moulds. I've got this off a beekeeper. And I just, when I get the beeswax off the beekeeper, I then pour them into moulds. I heat it up, pour it into moulds. Just those silica moulds, they're fantastic. I love those silica moulds. Great for soap making, all sorts of things. You just pop them out. And you can get all sorts of shapes and sizes. So there's the two little dragonflies that are soon going to be melted. And so we put them in there and we melt them. Now that take a minute to melt because it just takes a little while for beeswax to melt down. And of course, if you've got any oil, can you see the oil that's still coming out of there? Or then we can pour that in there as well. So get a bit more ointment that way. Now that will take a minute to melt. And when it melts, all we do is we stir it until it becomes nice and thickened. You can put it in some cold water if you wish, and that will speed up the process once it's melted. Don't ever put your beeswax in until you've already heated up your herbs. Okay, it's going to take a while to melt, so we'll just leave that there for now. Now I've been cooling this in the sink of water, and you can see what happens. It's just starting to thicken, so it just starts to thicken around the edges and thicken down the bottom. And you've just got to keep on stirring it in, and it will just get a bigger and bigger lump. If you keep it in the cold water too long, it just becomes extremely lumpy. So it's a good idea just to cool it for a short time in the cold water, then take it out and keep stirring it. Now this is eventually going to form one big lump. And if you have too many lumps and bumps, you can always use a whisk, you know, stick the bar mix in there or something. Okay, you see this is really starting to thicken now. We're getting it nicely in. Remembering the good ratio is 800 mils of olive oil, 100 grams of beeswax. But beeswax must be cleaned, so you actually always must clean the beeswax before you put them into moulds, so that then you can use it straight away. Now can you see I've got a few lumps and bumps in there, quite lumpy. So now I'm going to get the bar mix. I'm just going to hurry it along a bit, which is always very useful when you're trying to get something done. I'm going to get those bar mix. I love bar mixes. Best thing ever invented. I used to have lumpy gravy. I thought, oh, if I only come with lumpy custard, I could have done with one of these things. Anyone one will do. It doesn't have to be a bar mix as such. It can be any of those sort of machines. Those little whisks. See how it's getting all those lumps out? So everyone wants a nice smooth ointment. If you keep on stirring it, eventually all the lumps would go out, but this just hurries it up. Now while it's still nice and runny like this, what you do is you put it into a jug, such as this. And you find a spatula. Yes, well, spatulas are somewhere. Okay, we pour it into here. And you can see it's still pourable. Just grab a spatula. Okay, now I get the spatula. You can see it's going to pour beautifully into your jar. Whereas if you have to do it by hand, it just doesn't look quite as neat. And of course, if it starts going hard, you can just heat it up again, put a bit of hot water around the jug, so it actually looks much more neat and presentable. And you can also put the bar mix in there if you need to. So you can see that's still nice and runny and warm. So you can see that still runs. And so we'll pour that into a... Okay, now you see we're just pouring it. It's coming out nice and fluidy. Of course, the faster you do it, the more runny it is, which is really good. And then when you get it full, you just give it a little tap. So it looks perfect. And you put your lid on. Just give it a little wipe around the top. Any excess. Put the lid on, and you can see a smaller one that we do, and you can see the labelling that we do. Get some good labelling on there, and it makes it look very presentable. And certainly you can see it's much harder compared to the softer mixture we've got there. This is quite warm still, where that's gone cold.